Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. I hope you're cool with northern latitudes and neutrality, because for the first time, we're going to Scandinavia, exploring Stockholm, Sweden with Joel Hedman, a tour guide and beer judge who knows the city inside and out. Naturally, we talk about the beer scene in the Swedish capital, focusing on the cool Södermalm neighborhood, with Joel pouring out a few personal bar recommendations along the way. Then we talk about late night snacks and cover some of the classic tourist sites in the city, in addition to some lesser known Stockholm attractions. We finish up with a trip to the Stockholm archipelago and a chat about Swedish party holidays and how you can get in on the fun. All right, let's go to Stockholm.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
Let's welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns, Joel Hedman, certified Stockholm tour guide and beer judge. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And I know people listening are not going to be able to see this, but it must be just mentioned off the bat that you've got an impressive beard. And
Thank you very much. Same to you. Not as big of a beard though, but you rock a little bit. So you've got some.
So what's happening in Stockholm in 2025?
2025 really started off well, or really 2024 ended fantastically in terms of tourism, because it seems like winter tourism has really started to happen. Either it's become a lot bigger of a deal, or I've managed to get a lot more contacts in terms of work, because usually my guiding life has been divided into two parts: the active and the bear hibernation. It's from like October through March or something. Now I had to stay up.
So you think that's just the word getting out that Stockholm is such a great city?
I think there are several factors, but the thing I've heard, I think our economy being, or our currency being a little crappy as well, I think that helps, because we're generally seen as an expensive city, but now that our currency is not doing great, it's a lot more, you get a lot more value for coming over. I think also the fact that people have seen a lot of the traditional places in the summer, like Paris, London, whatever. People are traveling more and they want to see other places. And the winter part, I guess, I don't know, it just feels like if you want to go somewhere where you want to have the possibility of seeing the northern lights and stuff, then up in the very north of Sweden and our neighbors, that's a good place to do so. And then usually you want to squeeze in like a cityscape. In between there, you do a little city, or you even fly in here, maybe drive, although Sweden is very long, but people tend to take the opportunity to see cities since they're up here anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, what makes the city so special? Because it is, I've been a couple times now, and there doesn't seem to be anything quite like it that I've seen. As far as the setting and the atmosphere. But what makes it so special to you?
To me, I mean, I'm very partial. I'm born and raised here, so I have my family here. That's a big plus for me. No, but I think honestly, the main thing that I know a lot of people react to that I really love myself is the fact that Stockholm is really a city of water, more so than a lot of other cities. I know a lot of cities are on the water, but the fact that Stockholm is also mainly islands makes it even more, constantly close to the water. And I personally feel that the constant sort of nature being really nearby, it's close to 1/3 of our inner city is covered by green areas, another third water. So that, that sort of answers your that question right there. There are always things happening here. I guess the Swedish way is starting to interest people.
That's true. There's no doubt that you've got one of the best brands of a country in the world. There's no question. Like no one has a bad thing to say about Sweden.
Well, we're I guess that's neutral Sweden in effect, trying to stay away from sort of dodging most things. No, but I think in a more serious way, I think, and we share this with our Nordic countries, the sort of focus on other things than work. I think is one of those factors that I'm not sure how much that shines through when you visit, but still, it is something I do like. It's a different view of life, sort of slightly less career oriented. I'm not saying that we're lazy sort of layabouts, but
Of course not.
there is a different view of it, I guess.
So let's kind of walk through this. Like, whether you've flown in or you've arrived via train, you're probably one of your first stops is probably going to be Central Station.
Yeah, that's usually where you end up.
I think we should definitely focus on. There's this neighborhood that you live in that has seemed to come to the forefront as like one of the most symbolic of Stockholm, and like, a little off the beaten a little bit, but still
Yeah.
accessible and just full of fun things to do.
And I assume you're talking about Södermalm. I gotta be honest. I've moved away from Södermalm. I will forever blame my kids for this. No, but it was difficult finding big enough housing, or at least enough money to afford big housing there with two kids. So I do not live there, but I have lived in Södermalm for 16 years of my life, and I essentially went to school there. So I've spent most of my adult life, and even more so in Södermalm. So I definitely know it.
It's definitely, I think, a good welcome to Stockholm moment for me was when you're taking the you're taking a metro. What's it called there?
Mhm.
Underground? No,
Tunnelbana, like
the tunnel.
well, bana is like track, like essentially directly translated, it's tunnel track. But yeah, tunnelbana, yeah. T is the marking symbol for it.
And you're taking the T from Central Station out that to Södermalm, and you're crossing over the water, and you can see Gamla Stan, Old Town back
Yeah.
there.
No, I agree because I tend to do that a lot with my guests. I always really want to get something of Södermalm in there, depending on how I do my tours. But generally speaking, I mean, city of Stockholm is set up so that you have the old town in the very center. That's the birth of the city. That's where it all started. And then over time, the city got established onto more and more islands and surrounding mainland as well. So the Södermalm is often translated as the southern island in English, which means that if you have guests on the northern side, then it might be a little bit of a walk if you do a walking tour, depending on where you're starting and where you're ending. But I always tend to want to get them over there because up there you have the sort of highest natural points of the inner city and the best views of the city by far. Apart from everything else that I assume we're going to be talking about, it definitely, as a starting point, has the greatest viewpoints of the city.
First impressions are always great, and these
Yeah,
overlooks on in
yeah,
Södermalm are something special.
it definitely is. The cool part about Stockholm too is the fact that it's on two different bodies of water. So you've got the Baltic Sea on one side, and then you've got our freshwater lake on the other side. So it's essentially on the east, you've got the ocean, or aka the world, and on the west, we have our freshwater lake, which is huge. It goes essentially halfway to Norway, and it's the third largest lake of Sweden, seventh largest lake of Europe. It's a huge one. And right at the center of that, you have the old town. So the old town, as well as Södermalm, those two islands are on both bodies of water. And personally, I like both views. So you go both on the sort of western, one on the western side and one on the eastern side, just so you get the ocean and the lake view. And that doesn't have to take a lot of time because they're right next to each other. Stockholm is literally, they meet right there. Most cities would have on one side, they have the ocean, and on the other side, you would have a lake and then maybe a river or something flowing through. Stockholm is different that way because we were literally going head to head with each other, but lake and ocean. They're constantly sort of fighting, not fighting, but the lake is always flowing into the Baltic Sea because the lake is higher than the ocean.
I think when I was there, you can tell there's a lot of construction going on right around that area in between Södermalm and the old town, probably to do with that.
Yeah, that is the lock, the most central, the one that was most commonly used in feels like in living memory because they've been at it now for about 8 years. As of right now, it is at least a year ago. It was the largest active construction site in all of Europe, and it's the reconstruction of the actual lock for boats to be able to cross over, leisure boats, smaller ones. We have several other locks. There's also the reconstruction of all the traffic because it's a connecting point right there on the southern island, right just south of the old town. So they're building a huge bus garage down in the mountainside and things like that. So there are several things, and it turned out to be a huge excavation point as well. So it seems like it's never going to end, but they've said it's going to be done by 2027. So depending on when you're listening to this, you might be able to see the new lock finally completed.
Okay. And for anyone that's a big fan of active construction sites, the biggest going at any given time, they got a couple more years to make it.
Yeah, if you want to come back and look at a construction site, you can definitely go there.
What would you think of the idea of someone arriving in Stockholm and then going to a supermarket, picking up a couple cans of craft beer and walking up to one of those viewpoints, cracking them open and enjoying the scene as their first thing in Stockholm?
Well, I think they definitely should do that, but that's where I need to put in a very important warning. This will in part change, but we do have a lot of restrictions on alcohol in Sweden. You have a monopoly of stores that are the only ones allowed to sell alcohol with above 3.5% alcohol by volume, except for bars. So first order of business is you need to go to one of these stores unless you want a low ABV beer from a viewpoint, which is also possible. But I just wanted to get that in there.
I think it was a low ABV beer I had my hands on.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes that's good. You know?
Well, especially if it's noon.
Well, I'm a big day drinker myself, so.
Yeah, as the years go by, yeah, I'm starting to find the appeal and being like, you know what, noon to 6 sounds like a better session than 6 to midnight.
Yeah, I also have young kids, so I tend to not be able to stay up as late as I used to once upon a time.
So obviously, it does seem like there is a good scene of craft beer in Stockholm.
Definitely. Usually what we say within Sweden, we are definitely one of the better ones, or well, I should stop being coy here and just say we're the best in Sweden in terms of restaurant and bar scene, but in terms of sort of development of breweries and collaboration and things like that, I don't think we're number one. But in terms of as a customer going out trying phenomenal beer from a lot of local, but also from other parts of the world, and sort of just fantastic all around quality. Stockholm it's just a fantastic place to go for craft beer.
And Södermalm, plenty of places there.
Yeah, that's the mecca. Usually there is a small little sort of circle which is right on the edge of the old town and covers a big part of the central part of the southern island. Are the places that you sort of need to go as a craft beer enthusiast or as a visitor who wants to make sure that you have covered your grounds. There are a few outliers, of course, but I would say it's most important to spend time there.
And what, just a couple places that you would say are the ones you'd want to just make sure you stop in?
If we start in the old town, you have two places that I feel you should visit. Actually, one of them, the number one place that everybody sort of always talks about, and it's definitely has a good reason for why. I work as I write for an online beer magazine, and they were just elected sort of favorite beer bar in Stockholm, and they have been other places as well. But the place is called Zum Franziskaner, and it's like the German way of spelling it, Zum with a Z and Franziskaner, and it's right on the southern edge of the old town, and it's an old beer hall place, German style. It's from right turn of the century, so it has that old nice feel with the really tall ceiling. It has the interior intact as well from the beginning, but nice upkeep. But the thing is that the bar or the restaurant is run by a guy who ran Akkurat, which is right on the edge of the southern island. So I guess like a 10-minute walk between these two. Akkurat was, I believe it's currently number 2 in the world, or at least top 2 best beer bars of all time in the world. And it has had the number 1 spot for a long time. This was according to a bunch of people on Rate Beer, and it was open. It has to do with supply, and it has to do with how well they take care of the beer. But try to get to a very slow point here. The guy who ran Akkurat is the same guy who started up Zum Franziskaner. So he worked for Akkurat when it was considered the number 1 beer bar in the world, and then he sort of changed lanes and he opened a place that focuses more on German beer, specifically from the region of Bamberg, Germany, like northern Bavaria. It has phenomenal beer and food, some local as well, and some sour beers from Belgium. Cantillon, he always has that on as well.
So at this Zoom Franziskaner, that they're focusing on the northern Bavarian Bamberg area, Franconia?
Yeah, because he's worked a lot with them before, so that's their main focus. But they always have beer. They have a few beers that are brewed for them specifically, but it's mainly German style. Then you have a few others. They always have their own porter that's also brewed for them specifically. And they have, the Cantillon sours there always on tap as well.
Okay.
And they have German/Swedish traditional food, and the food is phenomenal.
That's a great tip, and that's perfect place right before or after a ferry.
Definitely, it's you can literally see the ferry coming in there, and usually you want to start with your lager beers. So that's you start in the old town, and then you venture up the hill into the southern island, and then it's going to be tough how to divide it, because I usually have 2 recommendations of lager places in Stockholm or in that area. There's another one that focuses just on Czech beer. That's also fantastic. It's called Soldatens Svek, and it's been around since the 60s, and you wouldn't get a better pour of Czech beers anywhere else, and they always have fresh, phenomenal Czech beer.
Okay.
The thing is, you kind of have to do this in 2 different days, maybe, unless you want to go around a lot. But one day you could start with German style, lagers, and then go on to do whatever you do after. And the other day you can start the day with Czech lagers and then move on and see what you want to do. Because you want to, take it in sort of increment segments. If you want to be able to taste the beers too, as a beer judge, I think that's important.
And then what about anything where there's things that are being brewed in Stockholm?
Oh, that was my second one. Sorry, I cut myself off by in the old town, there actually is a brewery that is literally on the island in an old building from the 1600s, protected historical building. And he brews a lot of different beer styles, but tends to always have. I feel that he's best at brewing lager beers. So actually, you put in a third lager beer place now, but it's called Munkbrunns Bryggeri. So Munkbrunn is the name of it directly translated Monk Bridge, because it used to be a bridge right there that would lead over to the old. The Grey Friars would have their monastery church on the adjacent island to the old town. That is also definitely worth a visit, but they tend to open slightly later, and they're not open every day of the week. I think they're closed Sundays and Mondays currently, and they open usually at 4 p.m.
So you had some monks up there too.
Definitely. The monks came around sort of late 1200s, and we've got the black and the gray friars. They were on sort of opposite ends of the old town, if you will, until we became Lutheran. They were kicked out. But we kept some of the nuns for a while for some reason. Put them in charge of taking care of the elderly and the sick. So we can keep the nuns, but all other Catholics would either be killed or pushed out.
Oh man.
Kind of. It's a weird thing, but
Nuns they're always good for, caring and helping. No one ever said there's too many nuns around.
usually no, you don't hear that a lot.
And then I got to give a shout out to this Omnipollo Hot because I was there 3 nights in a row when I was there.
Yeah, I was trying to work my way up the hill. I didn't get there yet. But in terms of modern, in terms of hoppy and modern and more American oriented, or hop forward beers, you've got two places. Or actually, I mean, Akkurat has that too. Akkurat has everything. But if you definitely want to have the freshest hop forward beers, Omnipollo's Hut or Hat and Stigberg's Foot. They're literally 3 minute walk between the two, and they both focus on hop forward beers, and they both do it really well. They both make sure to have everything cold constantly. And the thing I think is really cool about Stigberg's Food is the fact that now I'm showing you, so the guys who are listening, that the tubes, like the distance that the beer has to travel from the fridge to the actual tap is like nothing. He's kept it so short that you have essentially no waste and it doesn't get old.
Now I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that bar, the name of it again, but I do remember also that it's positioned, the street that it's on, that main street there. That's some good people watching.
It used to be like one of the main streets leading in or out of the city when the city was smaller. So it's always been sort of active, even though it's relatively small. But today it's a bit more, quite a lot of shops and cafes. Southern Ireland's also like a big cafe place. And I want to throw in one more now because the sort of golden triangle up in that region on the Southern Island, you also have Oliver Twist, which celebrated 30 years last year, 2 years ago. And they also have quite a lot of hoppy stuff, but quite a big variety. You can definitely have a lot of fun in one evening, just sort of running around between those places.
So you've had a fun evening, bouncing around sort of. What are you grabbing for a late night snack?
Yeah, I like actually you can find this on YouTube. Anthony Bourdain, when he was in Stockholm, it doesn't feel like a very official visit because the camera is not of that quality really, and they feel a little too drunk for that. But he's out with a friend of his, a Swedish lady, and they've been out drinking. And he's in Medborgarplatsen, which is not that far from where we're talking about now. Maybe a 10-minute walk from where we just sort of stopped. All the sort of hot dog stands have a tunnbrödsrulle in Sweden. I don't know if you had a tunnbrödsrulle yet. It's essentially a sausage that's put in like mashed potatoes and then rolled into bread, and then you put a bunch of different other stuff in there. It's just really greasy, and it's definitely good to fill you up after you've been out drinking. If you want to try something that I don't know that you can find anywhere else in the world.
So it's a hot dog on a bed of mashed potatoes.
Well, that depends how fancy you are, but I tend to want to have a bit more of a quality sausage than a hot dog. But still, yeah, essentially it's a hot dog, some sort of a sausage anyway, and then it's mashed potatoes. But depending on how fancy the hot dog stand place would be, what varies generally is the quality of the mashed potatoes, and they
Ah,
tend to have there are people that go around and sort of try the best, and usually the ones that win, they make mashed potatoes with a minimum of 50% butter in there, so it's heavy. I'll tell you that, but it's good.
So in the sausage, mashed potato, bun, and toppings equation, it's kind of the mashed potato that separates good from great.
I would say so because I mean, in the really low level ones, they would even have, the powder just pre-made crappy version.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure how many people get away with that nowadays, but anyway,
Get
uh,
away with it.
yeah, or are still around and do that, but it
They've
tends
been
to
run out
be,
of town.
yeah, generally we're pretty picky with food, I'd say. Maybe that wasn't the best sales pitch for us being picky with food, but we do have a diverse sort of food scene and quite a lot of Michelin restaurants now.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Okay, well, I just wanted to take a second to say thanks for listening to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. I hope you're enjoying this episode and that it's helping you get excited for your next European adventure. Be sure to check out the link in the episode description, because there you'll find all the information you need if you decide to follow up on the places and topics that came up on the show. Oh yeah, if you are digging the podcast and you had a spare minute, I'd be forever grateful if you were to leave a review or a rating on the platform you're listening on, as those little things do go a long way. And if you really want to get crazy, why not give me a follow on Instagram or Facebook at Rails, Ales, Old Towns. Back to the show.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Obviously, there's a lot more to do in Stockholm than just bounce around to beer bars.
Definitely. Got over 100 museums. If I briefly bounce back to nature, we've in the Stockholm archipelago alone, we have 30,000 islands. Sweden is the country in the world that by far has the most islands out of any other country in the world. And here comes the weirdest fact of this interview, and that is the fact that we are growing. We're getting new islands every few years. You know how most of the world is sinking? Well, we're the opposite. We share this with our most northern neighbors. The reason for this is because we were pushed down during the ice ages, historically speaking. When that giant ice cap melted away somewhere between 10 and 11,000 years ago, ever since then, we have been literally, physically rising out of the sea, which means every few years or so, get new islands that just sort of pop out of the sea. So this means that topography of Stockholm is completely different than it was originally. So I usually give the example of Viking Age because most people have some sort of a relationship to the Vikings. They might not know the time period, they might not know much about them, but you've heard of the Vikings. And so the people would have something to sort of connect it to. I usually talk about Viking era, which we say is around somewhere in the 700s up until a bit into year 1000, depending. It's actually usually the British that sort of say when it begins and ends because, well, unfortunately, or apparently we attacked over there.
Alleged.
Anyway,
Alleged.
alleged attack. No, but what I'm trying to say is somewhere 700, a bit into year 1000. And during that time frame, most of what we know as Stockholm today was not around. A lot of what we see as land and farmland today, or just meadows and fields, would literally be at the bottom of the sea back then. So
Wow.
that is one of the reasons why Stockholm didn't really come into play before the 1200s, because a lot more was underwater. So if you go 30 minutes north of Stockholm to our northern suburbs, you will find the most rune stones out of any other place in the world, which is the written language of the Vikings. Whereas in Stockholm proper, you won't find much, but they were definitely around, but they were a little further north.
Now, this is where somebody who is really professional would say, now, speaking of things coming out from the water, and we'd segue right into the Vasa.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely something that first went in the water and then came out. That's definitely one of our most popular museums, and it's one of those that you sort of have to see it to understand how great it is. I usually make an attempt to say that the Vasa ship, which we have, which is an old warship from the early 1600s, which is one of our most popular museums, which is a museum displaying that ship and things related to it. The reason why we're so, well, most people are so impressed by the Vasa ship is because it's from 1628. It is over 98% intact, original oak ship, very ornate, and we still have it, even though it's been 333 years underwater. So, since from what I understand, you're living in England, right?
Yep.
I'd say take that, Mary Rose. So, okay. Anyway, want to make sure to squeeze that in there.
Still bitter over this Vikings alleged
Yeah,
attacks.
yeah, that alleged attack, fake news. No, but it is just cool because there's nothing that well preserved anywhere else in the world that's of that magnitude and that well preserved, and it's just so impressive when you step into the museum. So that's one of those places I would usually say is a must.
You hit the nail on the head with that because I'm not. I will have said that I've seen and heard about this Vasa ship and the museum for about 20 years, and the previous trips to Stockholm, it didn't make the cut for whatever reason. But this last time when we went, I was like, okay, this ship's got a lot to live up to. This ship from the 1600s. I'm like, this gonna be. I've heard a lot about it, but it's really impressive. And when you said ornate, like the carvings, to just you look at these carvings and of these wildermen and these beasts and things, and you just can't believe you're looking at something original.
No, it is astonishing. It is really.
So to back up, just in case anyone hasn't ever heard of this Vasa, it basically went out on its maiden voyage and it sunk in the Stockholm harbor and it sat there for 300
Yeah.
years.
Sailed for a good 20, 30 minutes or so, about 1,000 meters on its maiden voyage on its way out to Poland, to fight Poland. It sunk still in the sort of outskirts of the Stockholm harbor. So it didn't get any further than that. It was way too heavy. They couldn't get it out. So it spent 333 years on the ocean floor until it was rediscovered in the 1950s and brought out.
And surely when people in the 1950s started talking about this idea of let's raise it, surely people
Yeah.
had to think, there had to be people thinking that was crazy.
Definitely, there were quite a lot of people. I think one of the main issues that you need to remember is, had this happened in any other decade in history, we would not have done it most likely because we were so flushed with cash in the 50s. We were the richest country in the world there for a minute, mainly because of our big industry that was still sort of running, and we stayed out of World War II and won, by the way. So the second that the war ended, the world needed to be rebuilt. More specifically, most of our neighbors needed to rebuild. Anyway, we were doing really well, and therefore a lot of investors were willing to spend money on it because they thought it was such a cool project. But today we have, not that many years ago, opened the Museum of Wrecks because now we have learned, okay, we're not going to bring out ships out of the sea anymore because we know how much time and effort and money that's put into it. So now we just have another museum that deals with all the wrecks at the actual bottom of the sea and talk about what's there instead of trying to bring any other ships out.
It was a one of a kind event basically, and it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, let's just say the stars aligned because had this ship gone out and sunk somewhere else, it would have been lost to us because it is the unique water quality of Stockholm that is the reason why it survived so well. So had the Dutch guy not messed up the construction so badly, and had it gone out, we wouldn't have had it. And and the thing is, during the time it took to get it out, it also our ways of preserving ships, our different methods improved so rapidly, so that had they done it just a few decades previously, they would most likely have done the way that they did it previous, which is just sort of bring ships out, let them air dry, and eventually they fall apart. It would have been a pop-up museum for a few years. Like eventually it would have been, here's a pile of dust where the Vasa ship used to be. So there are a lot of things that just align perfectly for the Vasa ship to be.
And I noticed that you had to get in there that it was a Dutch guy that made the mistake.
Yeah, Dutch. Yeah, we blame the Dutch. Yeah, of course. No, but it was mainly because we didn't really have the knowledge of it. The British and the Dutch, sort of big shipbuilders of the time, and is exceptionally large for its time. So that is, don't really know what went wrong, but they were definitely on the edge of what they had built previously. It was
They were pushing the
or
envelope.
definitely, definitely.
So, obviously that's a big hitter. You got to check it out. The old town, of course, it's just romantic as all get out. And, if you're there late at
Yeah.
night or early in the morning, you're going to pinch yourself at how these little alleyways and cobblestones and things, so obviously there's way more, big things to see. But what about a couple things that you would say are like your little favorites that to really get a kind of a feel for the city and, just something off the beaten path?
Well, if we start with like the museum side of it, there are a bunch of museums that tend to be missed by a lot of people that I find interesting. Like the military museum is one that I find to be very interesting. It doesn't sound interesting, maybe, but it deals with our our like war history, full of details and interesting things. And they've built these scary figurines. I remember they got a little bit of scary music in there, and they all look like the eyes are really stretched wide on these little figures in there, and the light is sort of dimmed. And sometimes it's kind of like I walked around there once by myself, and I was gotta admit a little scared just walking around in the actual museum. But I mean that's one that almost nobody visits. Same goes for the Royal Armory, which is essentially half of Europe that we stole in the 1600s, and in terms of treasure, and then a bunch of clothes from kings and queens, which maybe sounds dull, but when I add in the fact that we have three different bloody king's clothes in there that have never been washed, that might pique people's interest a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dirty
we
royal
we have
clothing is always got to see it.
we have the actual bloody underpants that Gustavus Adolphus was wearing when he was shot, only a few years after he commissioned the Vasa ship to be built, or at least after it sailed. So that's an interesting one. And then we have like the largest collection of armor. If we're on the concept of just talking about drinking history, like a stone's throw away from the Vasa, we've got the Spirits Museum, which deals with our drinking history. So there are quite a lot of museums like that. But in terms of off the beaten path and thing that I would like more people to experience, I would say the archipelago of Stockholm in some way or another is worth a visit because it's unique with all the islands and the sort of little island life that you can go out on. I usually make two recommendations to people that want to go out in the archipelago of Stockholm. You either go to Fjäderholmarna because it's only like 20 minutes out. It's like the start of the archipelago, and they actually have a brewery on there. Although as of like last year, they don't brew there anymore, or maybe it's longer ago. But anyway, they have like a tap room there, and they have a few restaurants. They even have a few not high end, but they do have like hotels or hostels there, and a few little shops and things. But it's the easiest or quickest way to get out into the archipelago, and you've got a few beaches on there too. They smoke the fish that they catch out in the archipelago every day. It's like a little slice of island life, but still, turned up so that you can go to nicer restaurants and stuff. And then Vaxholm is another one of those islands that people tend to visit because it's a little bit bigger, it's a little further out, but you have boats leaving more frequently. But as there are 30,000 of them, there are several that don't have regular boat traffic to them, that you need your own boat or get a, taxi boat or have somebody else pick you up. But just if you have the cash for it, I'd recommend just sort of hiring a guy or a girl with a boat and just sort of go out and see it because that is just phenomenal to go out in the archipelago.
Would you say you think it'd be something to do, like go out and spend a night, or do you think you can fully kind of experience it? Obviously, you mentioned that inner island, kind of a archipelago for beginners.
Yeah, kind of. Well, definitely, you could do both. And the thing is, due to our right to common access, I mean, you could pop a tent a lot of places if you want, because you have the right to be there up to 24 hours at least, as long as you're not right on somebody's property. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is Swedes see this as everybody's in a way. So. But you can definitely spend the night in one of the bigger islands out there. Um, but it's also possible to do it over the day. You just need to make sure you know the timetable for the boats, because otherwise you might need to spend the night even without having planned it
Now, I've got to share my
if
own
you do it
personal
on your own.
story here. We took your first option there because we had weighed out the times to the ferries and decided that we could only go to the closest in one. After a scare on the harbor where we just missed one, and then they went across to the island with the amusement park, and then they came back and switched captains just randomly, and we were able to get on it. So we made it out to the island. It was like one of this, invigorating experiences. We ran for it, we missed it, then we watched it go away, and then it turned around and came back. We ended up there. It was in September. It was like it had to be the last true summer day. It was in September. It was on a Sunday, and we were out at the restaurant on that island. It was called Rokarit.
Oh yeah, Requiem, like the smoke rig. Yeah.
Yeah. And we ended up just sitting there for like 2 or 3 hours in the sun, out like very far to the away from the reserved restaurant tables, and just sitting there in the sun, having a drink. And like it really felt like that this is a Swedish experience. And what made it even more special was in the restaurant, you had all these parties set up on the patio or on the outside terrace, and everybody was having, like the crawfish celebration.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Kräftskiva. Nice.
Tell me about that crawfish celebration.
The crayfish, they're quite small and they're from the lakes and they tend to be they're boiled in sort of dominant flavor is dill, and you do it in the fall every year where you like all Swedish parties you get a little bit of aquavit and you do drinking songs and like little shooters if you will, and it goes really well with that, and then you tend to have a little bread and bread and butter and cheese like on the side of that, and then you drink way too much beer. You have a silly hat on, and it's starting to get dark at night, so you tend to have these different color lights. So it's just some people do it. Some people are known for just every year we do the crayfish party. So the season for it is right around when you came, like September. It's actually contemporary in terms of time frame because that's when you were allowed to fish it. Because usually you don't want to drain the lakes of them, so you wait for them to become big enough so that you can fish them out for the season. So it's the season of that, and it happens right around the same time as another rather weird one, which is our fermented herring party, which is very similar, but with the difference that you eat the very, very, very stinky fish that is literally fermented and about a year old, and you put it in like a flatbread thing, and mashed potatoes and a bunch of things, and you drink a lot of aquavit and beer,
And
have
just tell
very
us real
strange
quick what
burps.
aquavit is. It's obviously a
Yeah,
spirit.
it's spiced heavy liquor from this region. So it has a very recognizable flavor to it. You always drink it like just a little, like a little shooter. And it's always present during our holidays. Like Midsummer celebration is a big one that predates Christianity here, or at least its roots. And then, of course, Christmas, Easter, all these sorts of events, and the crayfish party. Like all of these events take place when you have that, and you sing a drinking song, and you drink it throughout the dinner,
So we've got
kind
a
of thing.
crayfish. We got a crayfish party in September. We've got fermented
Yeah.
herring. When's that? October?
That's around the same time, and this has been sort of blurred by commercialism and things being available a lot more all year round. But the fermented herring thing is a lot less available, but it definitely has this sort of fall availability, and then you tend to get it. But usually it's the one that you've kept for a full year, which means that it's the 2 year old is the one that is the best one, according. But that's not something most people do because tends to have a strong scent to it. It smells a lot. But in the north of Sweden and some other parts, it's a lot more common. Another outdoor party that you do.
Now let me
Has a
ask
lot
you
of
about this
similarities.
midsummer because obviously, the reputation is spread far and wide that, in the summer, the Swedes, this midsummer celebration in June, it's a big party and you're celebrating the season and almost always the weather's nice for it. Is it true that if I was in Stockholm around that time, it would be a complete bust? Like if I showed up in Stockholm and said, I want to experience midsummer, would it be a total waste of time or would I somehow be able to pick up on that?
Well, that's the thing. It's very much one of those things where it's the locals do something like that every year. So that depends on if somebody has, it's usually like in your country house or something. Most Swedes would have some sort of it. Like, for example, I have an allotment garden. Now we're going into yet another term here. It has originated in Germany, and you can find it. You have it in England as well. I know that, like these little communal small gardens that you can grow stuff on, and then
Yep.
sometimes attached to the land, you have a tiny house.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have all these places within the inner city, even on the Southern Island, where they have these allotment gardens. They oftentimes have celebrations. Usually, midsummer is very inviting. And if it's a bigger one, then a lot of people are there, maybe doing part of the celebration together, like dancing around the maypole, at least, like in the
Okay.
allotment gardens. But if you want to do that without having to sort of find a out of the way place in the suburbs of Stockholm, they do have a celebration at Skansen, which is also like a stone's throw from the Vasa Museum, and they do have a traditional midsummer celebration where some people go there that are Swedish, but generally that's a way for visitors to be able to
Okay.
experience what it's like.
That's good to know because it's definitely on my bucket list and um haven't made it happen yet, but I've always been a bit like, oh, well, it's risky to go out way out in the countryside and hope you're going to find someone. But it's good to know that if you're in the city, if you, Wisconsin or possibly some outer outskirts, the allotments, and you're personally inviting anyone to your allotment who's listening to this right now.
Well, I can definitely invite you to the public one that takes place. Like you always have like a center part of the allotment gardens, part that you also can rent for your own parties. And I know people that come from all over because if you are a local, but you don't know anybody with a nice country house, or nobody feels, I don't want to throw that party, then sometimes you feel like, oh crap, what am I going to do? Especially if you have kids, because it's oftentimes the dancing is even more for kids, even though everybody does it usually. Then quite a lot of people come to these, so they're really open to the public.
I wanted to ask you, what you actually thought of. We touched about this a little bit in the beginning, but what's the what do you think the benefits of winter are? Do you think about coming in winter?
Well, there are several benefits. The winter is just a different animal because the sun sets a lot earlier, so a lot more people are indoors bigger part of the time. But I mean, in terms of views and in terms of like my best sort of memory of that, or one of my best experiences is if you manage to hit like really, really early spring where it's still cold and you still have snow on the ground and the lake is still frozen, just sort of walking around because then the lake of the inner city is usually frozen solid and people walk around there. So it's like a big just wonderland of just plain white. It's just shiny and the sun is out. Then you definitely have to wear sunglasses to be able to see anything at all. Those are some of my favorite moments, but it's really hard to manage to pinpoint that because the ice hasn't been thick enough. You know, a lot of years it sort of freezes over a little bit, but not all the way. And then you got to match that with the snow and stuff like that. But you could, for example, just go skating in Kungsträdgården right in the center of the city, right next to the old town, for example.
Oh, that's
They
cool.
have music.
Yeah, and you guys got the candles going, you got the coffee being poured. Like, definitely, if you like coffee, this is a place to be too. You guys are obsessed with it.
Yeah, we have some of the best coffee places in the world, apparently. That's also the Southern Island. Drop coffee on the Southern Island were actually voted best coffee in the world, I believe, some just a few years ago. And but I have to admit, we are only the second biggest coffee consuming country in the world after a tiny country called Finland, actually.
Is that a bit of a shot when you said tiny country?
We always try to take shots at our neighbors, but at the same time, we always try to be friendly. No, but what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to say here is, we have had a long history of being the biggest sort of coffee consuming country, and I guess as far as finding pride in the weirdest places, it's just sort of like a shot that they somehow managed to outdrink us a little bit in the coffee department. Uh, and when we're on the subject of Finland, also, of course, saunas would be cool. If you're into like polar plunge, you can definitely do that here. Go and jump in the freezing water and have a sauna after. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing to do.
Next time it's on the list. Maybe stay out in archipelago for a night somewhere with a sauna, jump out into the water from the sauna. Somebody's heading to Stockholm and they want to get in touch with you. What kind of, tours are you doing at the moment and how can they get in touch?
Well, the most obvious tours that I do would be, first of all, regular walking tour. I do a lot of walking tours, although I do all sorts of tours. So, dealer's choice, really. Well, that would be me, the other way around. Anyway, uh, but I also, of course, do craft beer related tours because we have a lot of beer history in the city as well. So that is something that I do. I always try to gear people to. I also like food tours quite a lot, just sampling the local food. I think that's pretty fun. Like one of those I mentioned, the tuberöl, something that you usually won't find if you go to a nice restaurant, but it's fun to have tried it. So food, drink, and general history, I guess, is what I tend to focus on. But I do a lot of, I see what kind of a person I have and what they're interested in. So I customize tours quite a lot. And to get a hold of me, find me at info@joelhedman.com. And on social media, on Instagram, I am Öldagboken, but that's a little weird. It's beer diary in Swedish. Oldagboken. Anyway, it might be easiest to find my website. joelhedman.com.
Okay.
So come to visit.
Absolutely.